Welcome, Pat, to the Courage to Lead podcast brought by the Executive Greatness Institute, where we help leaders become Chief Excitement Officers. I'm very excited to be talking with you today, Pat. It's been a long time, and it's very exciting seeing the physical intelligence book coming out and being such an amazing addition to the leadership literature and bringing a differently, very interesting aspect of looking at what really helps leaders become able to really handle everything on a daily basis. And as I actually thought about our conversation today, I remember when I was growing up in Egypt, one time going to the beach, and the sea had huge waves. And I remember one of those waves knocked me out completely. And for a few seconds, I did not know left from right, north from south. Completely lost my bearings until I was able to bring my head up above the waves one more time and see where the shore is and see where the rest of the ocean is. And as I looked at physical intelligence and also what's happening today, this sort of global environment that leaders are finding themselves in, I actually think it's almost like that wave. We've been knocked out and we're still trying to find our bearings. So I'd love for you, just for starters, I'd love for you to share with the audience, how did the idea for the book came about, and where do you see it being very critical component today?
Sure. And first of all, Ash, thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here and to see your face again. Before I talk about where the idea for the book came from and where it fits today, I think it's worth defining what physical intelligence is, because it's this intelligence we all have that so many of us don't know anything about. And I'm going to begin this, let me just dive in and tell you a little story. So right now, there are literally hundreds of chemicals racing through each of our bodies. These are naturally occurring chemicals, hormones and neurotransmitters, and they're racing through our bloodstream and our nervous system. And these chemicals dictate how we think, how we feel, how we speak, and how we behave. Most of us operate largely at the mercy of these chemicals, experiencing waves, just like that wave you mentioned, of emotion and thought and reactions without realizing that we can strategically influence them. And we can influence our reactions through how we breathe, how we move our bodies, how we think, including visualizations, and how we interact and communicate with each other. And if we do that well, then we're able to achieve more, stress less, and live and work more happily. And the ability to actively manage the balance of certain key chemicals. Now, there's some we wouldn't want to mess with. They keep our heart beating. Let's not touch that one. But there are 8 chemicals that we talk about in the book, and even more if we're in a longer training program. But 8 is enough for people as a start to absorb. And the ability to actively manage those is what we call physical intelligence. So that's what we're talking about, first of all.
Yes.
And where did the idea for the book come from? Well, as you know this firsthand, Ash, I've worked my entire career in sales and leadership consulting. The idea for the book, you know this firsthand, Ash, that I've spent my career providing sales and leadership consulting and training for organizations around the world, including one you used to work for. And in that process, I met a woman through a financial services organization where we were both working. And she has, and we actually met through a colleague of mine, met her, and she is a former dancer and choreographer. And she had created a module on using these physical intelligence techniques. And my colleague was intrigued, brought the content back to me and said, Pat, you used to dance. So if you read the book, everyone will understand that Claire had a whole career as a professional choreographer and dancer.
Yeah.
I'm an amateur dancer. I've studied for 15, 20 years, and it was my sport. So whatever sport you played growing up in Egypt, and a lot of people listening played football, baseball, basketball, dance was my sport. And I had that same foundation. The physical intelligence techniques, although the term may be new, the techniques have been around for decades. They're drawn largely from the worlds of sports and the arts. And they're all very well supported by neuroscience. This isn't just a couple of dancers thinking, hey, do this and it'll help you. It's very well supported by neuroscience. So our colleague, my colleague, and now our colleague, Jane, brought this to me and said, is there anything to this? And I said, absolutely. I've used these techniques myself throughout my life. And I'd also occasionally brought them into a curriculum, for example, on presentation skills, a little bit on negotiations. But I never thought about crafting an entire curriculum around these techniques. And I didn't understand as deeply as Claire Dale, my co-author, does, the chemicals, the chemical story. So, but it resonated with me immediately, and I knew that it was valid. So we ended up all investing in Claire's company, and we're now all part of that company in addition to the other work we do. And in the course of working to sell that, we realized that not enough people know what this is, and that's what led us to write the book, because the word had to get out there. Why should elite athletes and top performers in the arts be the only ones who understand that if you move in this way, if you breathe in that way, if you think this way, and you communicate this way, that your performance will be enhanced? This is a message for the masses. We really say it's applicable to every man, woman, and child on the planet. That makes niche marketing a little difficult, because we do apply to everyone, and very specifically leaders, and we've done quite a lot of work in that space.
That's fascinating, because it's definitely, obviously, sort of an inside-out strategy that people thinking about their bodies, thinking about the chemicals. I heard you in another interview talking about 400 chemicals. So I love the fact that at least you brought them down to a small number that's manageable for the readers. I wonder what the program looks like when you actually go into an organization and put together a program for them, where you actually highlight the physical intelligence component of how leaders show up.
Sure. Well, everything we do is customized. Just as you know from my past, everything is customized, because we believe every organization is unique and every individual and cohort is unique. So we spent some time understanding what this organization might be struggling with. For example, we worked with the CEO of a financial services organization came to us and said, you know, I have a wonderful executive team, but I'm concerned that they get along so well that they're too affiliative, and it's interfering with our ability to be more creative and innovative, because no one wanted to challenge the other person's thinking. So we worked with them quite a bit around convergent and divergent thinking as a subset of what we call flexibility. There are 4 elements in physical intelligence. The first is strength, and that's all about inner strength, confidence, resolve, appropriate risk-taking, speaking wisely and decisively in complex, high-risk situations without threatening others or feeling threatened. That's strength. Flexibility is all about adaptability, collaboration, creativity, innovation, agile thinking, embracing change, where strength would be driving change. Flexibility would be about embracing change and encouraging creative discourse. The third is resilience, which is just what you think, bouncing back from adversity. And the fourth, and developing a learning mindset, the fourth is endurance, which is staying focused, high energy, and clear for the long term, when you need a sustained effort, difficult effort over the long term. We are dealing with a lot of endurance. We're dealing with all of this right now, but we're all in what we would call an endurance tunnel. But to go back to that CEO, we spent time in all of these areas, but he very specifically brought us a flexibility challenge. And by understanding each of the individuals, so in that instance, we did group training sessions, and then we did individual coaching, because everybody had their own strengths and areas for improvement, that one-on-one coaching was a safer place to address those in, and then brought them back together, had them together at the beginning, brought them back together a couple of times so that they could create a new plan that was more creative, more innovative. And off the back of that, that organization has achieved increased operating efficiency and improved customer and employee satisfaction scores and better reports from the regulators. And the CEO credits physical intelligence with doing
Amazing.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. We have other teams where we work with new leaders. So a group in the technology space, they came to us and said, we have new leaders and we've trained them how to coach, but we think that they don't understand enough about this need to develop people. And so we worked with them on all areas. Again, first of all, they're new leaders, so they need to work on that foundation of strength. Often then you're leading people who used to be your friend. And while there are all sorts of other valid tips around how to do that, there's an inner strength that you need to bring to that new role. In fact, there's a study out of Stanford that it's the individual with the most open and expansive body posture who is looked to as a leader in times of crisis, regardless of the title they have.
Interesting.
So
yeah.
we can intentionally learn to do that and show up as a leader and then adapt through the flexibility, be resilient, et cetera, et cetera. So every organization is unique, but the solution includes training, coaching. We do reinforcement webinars, we do podcast series. Any number of tools are available to organizations to introduce this to their, whether they're leadership teams or frontline sales. We helped a pharmaceutical company where the sales team they were really struggling with holding their ground in negotiations. And we introduced strength, flexibility, resilience, and endurance. You need all of those in a negotiation. You need to you need to show up with confidence. You need flexibility because you're not going to win every point. You need resilience to deal with the inevitable having to not reach whatever agreement you wanted on point XYZ. And often you need endurance if it's a protracted negotiation.
Absolutely.
They experienced a 12.5% improvement in commercial success within 3 months of going through that training. And again, these are not our claims. This is the client coming back to us and saying, this is amazing. We've been working with them forever on the negotiation skills. And in 3 months after physical intelligence, these numbers just went through the roof. So it works. You just, again, don't confuse the simple with the unimportant.
Yeah.
There are, with surgical precision, we can go in and give you a few things to do that literally do change your chemical makeup. And most people aren't aware of that.
Yeah, and this, of course, it's going to affect how they speak, the ideas that they are able to bring up, how they are coming across with the client, how they interact with other people around them. I mean, it's basically the starting point for being and behaving and thinking and doing things a certain way. And it's really starting with that ability to be present in the moment. As you said, also apply the postures that give them that presence and that grounding. I just want to let Helene know that this is definitely, now that we've spoken a little bit about the topic, if you'd like to unmute and ask questions, Helene, definitely feel free to do so. Let's go ahead and kind of give the audience a sense of when they engage with you and Claire and other people on the team, how do you sort of go through the process of figuring out where the opportunity is?
Well, it's similar to any customizing process that I've used for all of my years. It's decades now of customizing training. So we begin by speaking with generally whoever's invited us in, whether that is the CEO or the head of sales or someone in learning and development. And we ask, where is the group today? Where are they heading? And where do you see them struggling? And then as we listen to those challenges, we're mapping them to, that sounds like strength could help. That sounds like flexibility could help. They're definitely going to need some endurance there. Sounds like they've been through the mill. They probably need some work on resilience. And from there, we go into a library of content that's vast. It would take several days to take a group through everything. And we cherry pick what we think is going to have the greatest impact in the time that we have, just like you would in any training program. If you say, I need sales training, I mean, there's a whole body of content on sales training. We figure out how much time do we have, how many people will be there, what are their challenges, and then we craft a program for them. If it's one-on-one coaching, it's entirely different because then we're tailoring it to each individual, and there's a whole coaching process behind that. But you mentioned something just to help bring this to life for people.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about finding their voice.
Yeah.
There's another quick story that I'll tell. There's a global FMCG company, and we've now worked with their R&D team around the world because this team was doing remarkable work in science. These scientists were doing incredible work, and they had powerful recommendations, and they were not being heard because of how they were showing up. So they were just being overlooked and dismissed. They started to go through this training, and their projects are getting funded at an accelerated rate. They're being asked to lead initiatives. They've scaled back training in other areas, but leadership has said, don't touch that because that's really making a difference. And again, I'm not saying this purely as a commercial. I really want people to understand that.
No, it's so valuable.
And scientists are not, a lot of them, and we can't generalize, there are some scientists, I'm sure, who run marathons and triathlons and all sorts of things. But a lot of scientists are very cerebral, as are people in the technology world. If
engineering and so on,
Correct. And even in finance, the quant mind, we spoke to the National Association of Corporate Directors. And these are individuals who sit on boards of directors for companies around the country and the world. And we were talking about different ways of breathing to achieve different things. And someone came up to us at the end, was a gentleman in his 50s, looked fit enough. And he said, what do you mean, pay attention to my breath? Doesn't it just happen? Well, yes, it does just happen. But if you practice yoga, you know that there are benefits to paced breathing. But if you haven't been introduced to that, even football players today on professional teams are introduced to that, but not everyone has been introduced to that. So some of the techniques will be familiar. It's a repository of techniques drawn from multiple disciplines and mapped to the impact they will have on your strength, flexibility, resilience, and endurance. You don't have to read a book just on sleep and just on confidence and this, that, and the other. You can read this.
The integration of them.
Yes. And then, of course, there are new techniques that are unique to us. At least we believe they are, but you can't copyright an idea. So, from me, those are the stories that motivate me because that's our driver in this world is to help people enhance their own quality of life, both at work and at home. And if in doing that we can generate stronger business results, isn't that wonderful? And even bigger picture, we believe there's an opportunity for organizations to create a more physically intelligent culture. So, there are companies that do a great job at creating creativity zones, the Google Nap Pods, all of those things. Some companies, however, are doing basically just checking the wellness box without understanding that the reason to provide, and we believe this is bigger than wellness, but the reason to provide those solutions is not just because our employees now want it or are asking for it or to be employer of choice. There is scientific evidence to support and anecdotal evidence through the results we're achieving that if you invest in developing this capability in your people, this physical intelligence, it doesn't just sit alongside cognitive and emotional intelligence. It underpins them. It's a foundation. The stronger your physical intelligence, the stronger your cognitive,
you're able to function.
Emotional intelligence.
That's incredible. So, Helene, I want to give you the platform. If you have a question that you want to ask, go ahead and unmute. Go ahead. Hi, Helene.
I see Helene is unmuted, but we can't hear her.
The audio is still not coming across.
Can you chat the question in, Helene?
So I will definitely give her time, and you can step in anytime, Helene. So the question that actually comes to me when I go back to that story I was telling at the beginning, this huge wave that because of the pandemic, that all leaders in companies, within a few days, they had to shift a lot of things. And I know that, we couldn't do this conversation earlier, but some of them will be listening to this conversation, and I hope that you can give them a few nuggets that perhaps it's in the morning, some things that they could do that will give them that shift that's going to make a difference in the day. Because there's
Sure.
something in what you're saying that is phenomenal in helping them bring a different energy in the room. So I'd love to, if you could speak to that.
Sure. Well, I'm going to start with some basics, not to be boring,
Yeah.
but because they are foundational, and they're posture and breathing.
Mhm.
So this is part of my protocol. I think it should be part of everyone's protocol. So when I wake up in the morning, I immediately start paced breathing.
Mm.
Paced breathing is the first of all, it's the number one thing to do if you're ever feeling under stress. It is the go-to technique if you're ever under stress. And for paced breathing, that is breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, diaphragmatically. Diaphragmatically means that when you breathe, we don't want to see your shoulders come up. In fact, I'm breathing right now and you don't see any change here because I'm pushing my abdomen, my lower abdomen out, filling my back with air. If you really sit down and focus on this, and you might even want to lean forward with your forearms on your thighs and breathe in so deeply that you feel almost wings expanding on your back.
Mm.
That's the depth of the breath that we'd like you to take. 10 minutes of paced breathing a day, you set the pace. It can be a steady pace in and out. For example, a count of 4 in and 4 out. So it can be a shorter in breath and a longer out breath. I'm going to talk about why that matters in a minute.
Mm.
So you might have 6 in, 8 out. You get to set the pace. The key is that it's a steady pace. If you practice paced breathing for 10 minutes a day, and 20 even better if you can, maybe even if you break that up, doesn't have to be 20 at a shot, it can be 10 in the morning, 10 at night. There was a study in South Africa of bankers that found that after 20 minutes of paced breathing, after 3 weeks, their cognitive function improved by 62%. Now, your percentage might not be exactly the same, but if they can get to 62, I'll take half of that and be excited. So that's, to me, is a significant impact. And that also gives you more clarity of thinking. So it reduces your cortisol, gets it to optimal levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone. That's probably one of the 8 that everyone has heard of. And it brings that down so that you can have that clarity of thinking, which if ever we needed it, we need it now. Also, your posture, you need to be sitting if you're sitting, you want your feet flat on the ground yourself, hip width apart, shoulders, imagine that they're actually floating out to opposite sides of the room. Sit tall. Imagine that string, if I go back to my ballet days, that string coming out of the top center of my head, suspending me from the ceiling. Your chin isn't going up. You're just lengthening the back of your neck. And I'm giving you like a speedy version of this posture and breathing, right?
Yeah.
But get your posture in place and get your breathing in place. This is like the foundation of the house. The walls will not stand if you move on to flexibility, resilience, and endurance, if you do not put the foundation in place. So start there. We have that in place. Now, flexibility, physical tension can lead to emotional and mental tension. So if you need to think creatively, you need to make sure that your body is limber. First thing I do when I get out of bed in the morning is I scan my body for points of tension. Mine, because of all the time I spend in front of the screen, and for many people, I have tension in my neck and my shoulders.
Shoulders are, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to figure out a way to loosen that up, and there's some quick exercises you can do, and drop, inch your shoulders up, and then drop them. Circle your neck. And these are not revolutionary techniques. It's the protocol that makes the difference. and knowing that if I don't do it, it's actually going to inhibit the quality of my thought. So eliminate the tension and then spark creativity by doing a couple of things. Study out of Stanford proves that we're 45% more likely to have a creative or innovative idea if we're walking versus sitting. That can be on a treadmill. But of course, if you're out in nature, even better, if you can do that safely wherever you are. Or if you can't move, just shift your focus and look at something around you that's beautiful. That can be a piece of art on the wall. It can be a landscape out the window. It can be a photograph of your family. Look at something you find beautiful. That helps spark creativity by the chemicals for flexibility are oxytocin, dopamine, DHEA, and serotonin. And we call getting those in balance upping your odds for creativity, innovation, collaboration, agility, all of that. So it's an easy way to remember those four. You're upping the odds, ODDS.
Yeah.
The other thing for flexibility is to twist at the waist twice a day, because serotonin is also produced not just in our brain, but by independent neurons in our gut. And we need to move at the waist to flush toxins that build up around our organs, especially, again, if we're living in this world. How many of us are on back-to-back Zoom calls, video conferences?
Yeah. Especially now.
Right now. So, and yet we're being called on to be more creative and innovative, but we're in this restricted zone of sitting in front of the computer.
Yeah.
And often we're hunched. That's going to inhibit the body's ability to communicate with the brain and vice versa. So that's why that posture is important, so we can keep communicating.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we can be flexible enough to be creative. So there's some flexibility. And then for resilience, that's really more about developing a learning mindset. And there's a whole technique on bounce positive, but I would just say, learn to let go. If you're ruminating about something, allocate X amount of time to thinking it through, putting yourself back in that situation, figuring out what can I take away from this, and not blame yourself. Know that you cannot be the first person this has happened to. What's the learning from it? If you need to talk to somebody, talk to them, and then you commit to letting it go. If you find that the news is dragging you down or social media, then take breaks from social media. And another key thing, we call it rest. Retreat, eat, sleep, and treat. Retreat is just like the tennis player who puts the towel over his head. We are in the zone trying to solve these problems, right? You are just constantly we're shifting from one problem to the next. You need to take a break, put the towel over your head just like that tennis player, get some perspective, and then come back fresh. Eat, make sure you're eating healthy. I know it's boring, but this is not the time to be loading up on pizza and ice cream.
Exactly.
Right? We'll talk about treats in a second. Sleep, that's a minimum 7 hours. They say 7 to 9, aim for that. Not as easy. So right now, certainly for me, the time to build your resilience is before you need it. So if you've been maintaining good sleep, then you might be tapping into your reserves and you'll need to refill them. And then treat, we're talking about healthy treats. So a square of chocolate's okay. The whole brownie, not so much. And also reading a chapter of a book or listening to beautiful music or riding your bike, that kind of a treat. Those restorative activities, as busy as you are, if you put them in your calendar and you honor them and you encourage your team to, then you're less likely to end up in burnout or have your team end up in burnout. And I think right now, in a leadership role, we have a tendency, some of us, not all of us, to go into command and control. I've got this, I can lead you. And we need to be vulnerable, to borrow a phrase from Brené Brown.
Yeah.
And compassionate. So we must look to those around us, make sure they're all right, and still collaborate, still involve them so that they don't feel that this is being foisted upon them. So that's remember rest and put those blocks in your calendar. So you asked me to give you tips. I'm going to give you one more.
That was fantastic, yeah.
Right? I have one more, which is endurance. That's our fourth element. This is very challenging right now. Endurance is all about the long haul. and
Yeah.
making plans for the long haul. But we have so much uncertainty. What can we do? Well, you might have some vision out there that is uncertain, but the interim milestones might be a little more clear. So you create that timeline and make sure that as you move through that timeline, you celebrate your successes when you achieve a milestone. And you might even set more milestones than usual so that you give yourself and your team something to celebrate and really celebrate.
Yeah.
Right? This reaction is, we call it the winner pose. We've been talking about it even, I know Amy Cuddy's been doing a lot of work on this.
Yeah.
And we've been following that, but we call it the winner pose because even blind athletes will go into this pose when they cross the finish line or they're named the champion. So it's an instinctive reaction to success, throwing your arms in the air. So celebrate. And what studies also tell us, these are scientific research studies, that if you firm your muscles as you are working toward that goal, and you can this is a visualization.
Yeah.
Visualize walking that timeline from interim milestone, all the way to that goal. Actually visualize it in your mind. And if you have space in your home, walk the timeline, land on the milestone, firm your muscles as you're getting there, and then strike that winner pose. It actually increases your chances, your likelihood of achieving the goal.
Making it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating science, what the body chemistry will motivate us to do. And we've seen it play out in large scale in organizations around the world.
Amazing, amazing. Helene, I want to give you another chance if you're able to join via audio and share any questions you may have. See if it works this time. No, this has been very, very insightful and inspiring, especially now, Pat. I think, as I said in the beginning, people are, struggling with, like right now, you're talking about the timeline. People are actually looking for a timeline, and but I do believe that the visualization that you just brought is for people to then think that they just need to take it in chunks,
Correct.
and keep adapting on a daily basis.
And keep it realistic.
Yeah.
Don't set these goals that are going to be unattainable and then you don't achieve them. Everyone's dopamine drops. They feel unrewarded. They're demotivated.
Yeah.
You can set realistic milestones and you make a point of celebrating achieving it and showing appreciation. So we talked about compassion under resilience. Appreciation for endurance is crucial. And we know that we should do it. As leaders, we can get busy, we can forget. Whatever you need to use to remind yourself to appreciate your team, because as the saying goes, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat.
Yeah.
And they're not all in work environments that are conducive to efficient focus,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. We have to be especially grateful for anything that our teams are doing right now. I think that's one of the key points for leaders always is, I believe, it was a colleague of mine years ago who said, plants need to be watered more than they need to be pruned. People are the same. So I'm a big believer in the power of praise, always. And especially times like this when you see everyone mobilizing, even if they choose an idea that doesn't work, as long as it was well thought through and well intentioned, you celebrate the innovation and you thank them for that, because we all need the strength, we need the creative flexibility.
Yes.
We need to recover from whatever impact this is having on us through the resilience, and we're in this for the long haul. May I read a quote? There was a great quote.
Sure.
It was in an article in the Harvard Business Review by Doug Sondheim. And he writes, in the weeks and months ahead, leaders need to move beyond themselves and stand in other people's shoes, endure challenges on others' behalf, be open and vulnerable, experiment with ways of offering communication and support, Trust that caring and open-hearted leadership will not only pay off now, but also reap rewards well into the future. And that
That's
leapt out at
beautiful.
me. Yeah,
Yeah,
we couldn't agree more. This
absolutely.
is the time to be a very human leader. That doesn't mean you don't do all of the good strategic work that you know you have to do. But that
Yeah.
human side of leadership is particularly important.
Absolutely, got to overcycle on it. This is wonderful, Pat. Really appreciate it. And I'd love for you to also share with the audience how can they engage with you and the rest of your organization, particularly now for perhaps helping them and helping their leaders as well.
Yes, so you can reach me at Pat, P-A-T, at companiesinmotion.com. Our website is companiesinmotion.com. So I think those two things would be great. I'm also on LinkedIn under Patricia Peyton, P-E-Y-T-O-N. And I would love to hear from you. We would love to hear how you're facing those challenges around strength, flexibility, resilience, and endurance.
This has been very, very helpful and just amazing angle of looking at how people can really tap into the inside and bring that to the outside. And as you said, sort of overcycle on the human connection as well.
That's
Pat,
right.
thank
And
you so much. Please go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and so we believe, because of the fact that it underpins our cognitive and emotional intelligence, physical intelligence, that it is really the human intelligence for the 21st century. Artificial intelligence is the intelligence for the 21st century. Physical intelligence is the human intelligence for the 21st century. So we can all live more fulfilling lives.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Ash. It's been my pleasure to talk with you. And Helene, I would love to answer any questions you have and just to hear in general what you think of the book.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Pat. I'm sure she can definitely reach out on LinkedIn. And I want to thank everyone who would listen to this. Please do reach out to Pat and also check out the book on Amazon as well. Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you, Ash. Have a great day.